Now, I'm going to start this video out with a really quick story. When I was 8 years old, I saw the movie Aliens in the theater. And if you've ever seen that movie, and I really hope you have since it's great, you're probably thinking to yourself, that movie's a bit intense for someone that age to have watched. And I'd have to agree with you because I do remember being just a bit scared while watching it. However, what I remember the most or the clearest about that first time watching it, and yes, I've seen it many times since then because it's one of my favorite movies of all time. Anyway, what I remember most was just how tense and nervous the last part of that movie made me when Ripley, after having essentially escaped a nightmare scenario, goes back to save Newt, a young girl who was the sole survivor of a colony that had been wiped out by aliens. And to save her, Ripley must literally go alone into the alien queen's lair. And she has to do all this in under 20 minutes because the whole station is about to be destroyed in a nuclear blast. And even though on the surface that may sound like one of the most fantastic or unbelievable scenarios ever concocted in someone's imagination, to this day it's still one of my favorite sequences in any movie ever. And what makes it work, what makes that whole movie work in fact, is that you entirely buy into the character of Ripley. She feels as real, relatable, and as human as the person sitting next to you in the theater. And when she goes back to save Newt, you don't roll your eyes and question it and think, no one would actually do that. You instead think to yourself, yeah, that's exactly what that character would do. And not only that, but you desperately want her to succeed. You're afraid for her. You truly care about what happens to her. But you really don't know if she can pull this off because the movie hasn't presented her like some type of superhero. Rather, it's portrayed her as pretty much an average woman who finds herself in the craziest of predicaments, who ultimately does the bravest thing I've ever seen in a movie. Or perhaps I should say it's the greatest yet most believable act of courage I've ever seen in a movie out of a character who feels 100% genuine. Because in reality, the bravery and ultimate success of a character in a story is controlled entirely by the one writing the story. But what a good movie or book does is make us forget about the person behind the curtain who's actually controlling and determining everything. A good character and or a good story do not feel like characters or stories. They instead feel like real people experiencing real events and overcoming them because of their own actions and abilities, even when those events are otherwise unbelievable, like when Ripley faces down an alien queen. And the thing is, I've never thought of Ripley as a female character before, or a strong female character, which I know might sound insulting, but my point is that I've always just viewed her simply as a character, no more, no less. I've never felt the need to label her as something special, because I don't watch Aliens and get the impression there was any type of agenda or any type of point they were trying to make about women with the character. In other words, I don't think they set out to make her an iconic character that might represent something. Rather, they just set out to make a believable character in a really good movie. And ironically enough, because of that approach, they ended up making an iconic character. And this is an approach I wish those writing the new Star Wars sequel trilogy could have understood, because since day one, since basically the announcement that a sequel trilogy was going to be made, they have made a big deal out of the fact that the new main character was going to be a female, which, look, that's fine, it's great even. It makes perfect sense within the context of Star Wars where Force-sensitive beings have always been chosen at random by the Force, which means there's basically a 50-50 shot someone strong with the Force is going to be a woman. Not to mention, I think the assumption before any of the sequel trilogy movies came out was that Rey was going to be a Skywalker or a Solo. So again, there's a 50-50 chance either Leia or Luke would have a daughter. Basically what I'm saying here is that no real Star Wars fan is going to have any sort of issue with a female lead. It makes perfect sense. Not to mention, there have been plenty of great female characters in Star Wars already, especially for those who have followed the expanded universe. And never once have I heard anyone complain about any of those female characters, because more often than not, they ended up being great, well-written characters that fans loved. Which is all people wanted out of Rey, that she be a good, well-written character, and had they done that, people would love her right now too, I guarantee it. But the problem with Rey is that it was clear from the start that there was going to be an agenda for her beyond just being a good character in a Star Wars movie. They wanted to make her a symbol, an icon for women, which isn't necessarily a bad thing, don't get me wrong, but it's still something you have to earn by actually creating a great character and telling a captivating story around her. And the more you tell people ahead of time what you want her to be or represent outside of the story, the more you ruin the illusion of that story when you finally watch it. The more you can see the creators behind the curtain pulling the strings of the character, having her do exactly what they want her to do to fit the real-life narrative, and not to fit the narrative of the story. Which means nothing she does in the movie feels genuine, like what she would really or actually do, but rather feels like what the storyteller wants her to do to make their point. Going back to Aliens again for a moment, when Ripley risks her life to save Newt, it feels like something the character would do. The story has set that up perfectly. However, when Rey rushes off to save Kylo Ren in The Last Jedi, it feels like what the story needs her or wants her to do there, not like a decision Rey would come to on her own. Because let's not forget, she watched Kylo Ren murder Han Solo literally days ago within the context of the story. After talking to Kylo Ren a few times for a couple minutes, she's now going to place all her faith in him and turn herself in. And what further compounds the unbelievable nature of this character is that Rey gets herself out of this problem all by herself. She manages to best Snoke's guards that are no doubt some of the best, most elite warriors in the galaxy, clearly trained to fight Force-sensitive beings since they have weapons designed to work against lightsabers. Not to mention, they get the best of Kylo Ren at one point, which shows just how skilled they must be. Rey, however, wielding a lightsaber for the second time in combat, is going toe-to-toe with them pretty well. She only takes a small cut on the arm, even though about a week ago she was fighting off thugs on Jakku with a staff, which, mind you, is completely believable since she no doubt would have learned some level of self-defense to survive on such a harsh planet. But how self-defense against thugs translates into besting the elite guards of the most powerful being in the galaxy just a week later is beyond me. Because this scene would have worked a lot better, and I'll take some heat for saying this, if Kylo Ren had just essentially saved Rey by going Force Unleashed on the Praetorian Guards, while Rey did all she could just to defend herself and to survive. This then would have also set up just how powerful Kylo Ren truly is, or can be when he embraces the dark side fully, and how Rey has a lot to learn yet, that her win over him in The Force Awakens when Kylo was injured was mostly just a fluke or him wanting to train her instead of just kill her, which means he held back against her. And what this also does is set up tension for the last movie, because we now realize just how great of a threat Kylo Ren truly is, that if he lets himself go, he could probably easily best Rey in a fight. Either that, or after Kylo saves Rey here, she actually joins him, because he's willing to train her whereas Luke was not, and this plays off the one weakness Rey seems to have, which is a strong desire for belonging anywhere. And so now the movie ends with Kylo proving how badass he is, Rey utterly failing, and Luke still being around to redeem himself in the end. Problem is, none of that fits in with the narrative they've been constructing outside of the sequel trilogy, where they've been telling us since before the movies ever even started coming out that Rey was going to be a strong female character and something girls of all ages could look up to and aspire to be like. And you can't have an icon that fails and makes terrible choices, right? I mean, who could ever relate to someone who fails and has vulnerabilities? Why would we want anyone, girls or boys, to think that sometimes we might make costly mistakes? But what makes us a hero is picking ourselves up after we fail and finding our way again. And I know what you might want to say to that, because pretty much everyone in The Last Jedi does fail. For better or worse, that's the point of the movie. And yes, even Rey fails to save Kylo Ren. And maybe it'd be easier to believe that truly had an impact on her if 10 minutes later, she wasn't all smiles in the Millennium Falcon as she's blowing up TIE fighters saying, "I like this." Or if the movie didn't end with the dozen or so people left in the Resistance being all smiles after losing all their ships and several hundred of their comrades. However, what is truly ironic about the character of Rey is that though her creators wanted her to be some type of iconic symbol of strength to women, she has instead resurrected a label that, quite honestly, I had never heard of in all my years of reading and watching movies. And let me tell you, I have read a lot of books and seen a lot of movies in my life, and never had I heard the term Mary Sue until after The Force Awakens. And though a debate can be had about whether or not she fits the original criteria for what a Mary Sue is, the thing is, thanks to Rey, the term has basically been redefined to mean a female character that's inserted into a story that is perfect for the sake of being perfect, and insinuating that all women can and should be strong, which is absurd because everyone, men and women alike, have strengths and weaknesses. And it's not perfect characters that always win that we relate to and learn from, it's imperfect ones that manage to overcome after they've failed. And of course, the real problem with all of this is that a good portion of the fanbase has outright rejected Rey. They've rejected this character that was meant to be, by her creators, an icon. And this rejection is being interpreted as a rejection of all female characters in general, mostly by men, which is both sad and ridiculous. Because for one, there are plenty of women out there who also don't like Rey. Plus, a vast majority of men not only have no problem with good female characters, they actually love them. Because I'm far from the only guy out there that thinks that Ripley is one of the greatest characters anywhere ever. and she's only one example of a great many strong female characters that men absolutely love. And to keep it real with you, what's frustrating Star Wars fans right now, and why so many are turning away, is because they've been told there is something wrong with the franchise they love, and it's always been wrong, that it just doesn't have enough strong female characters, even though, again, there have been several great ones in the past. Not to mention, the EU was chock full of great female characters. Anyway, not only do they at Lucasfilm insist there's been something wrong with Star Wars all along, and by association the people who have loved it, but they're going to now fix it by giving us the character of Rey. And then they sit there and pat themselves on the back for saving Star Wars from a problem that didn't exist. And when we tell them we think there are legitimate problems with the character that have nothing to do with her gender, they continue to insist it's something wrong with us. And what this has all done is cause a ripple effect, where now some tend to question the purpose of other female characters in upcoming movies. A prime example of this is Captain Marvel, set to come out next March, because there are already some preparing to boycott this movie because they think it'll be the start of an SJW movement within the Marvel Cinematic Universe. I'm not saying they're right, and I'm not saying they're wrong, just that this is a belief held by some, thanks in large part to a trend that maybe wasn't started by The Force Awakens, but was certainly brought to the forefront by it. Which is a true shame, because if Rey had been handled right, as I said before, I fully believe she would be a beloved character, embraced by a vast majority of the fans who would be rooting for her going into Episode 9 now. She could have easily been the next icon of Star Wars had they just thought about the best way to make her a part of the story, not about what she could mean for women. And in turn, much like Ripley in Aliens, she would have become a symbol of strength and courage, not only to women, but to any and all Star Wars fans, men and women alike. Well, that's all I've got for you this time. Now it's your turn to tell me what you think. Has Hollywood done more harm than good as of late? Have they created problems where none existed before? Let me know what you think in the comments below, and let's talk some Star Wars. And until next time, thanks for watching.